Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. And as you see on the screen, this is my website with all the libraries I've been creating, mostly front-end libraries about creating user interfaces. So pretty much Merced UI is in my main library. That one and Component Zoo I think have the most sort of robust tool sets for building front-end UIs. But basically Merced UI, simple component, Merced element, chain element, basic element, and component zoo, and fun component, they're all built around the web component API. And while the web component API is nowadays pretty standard in most browsers, so it's pretty compatible. It's not super like like as compatible as many would like, as far as making sure that everyone can see your website. So if I'm building some multi-million-dollar company's website using strictly a web components, older customers with older browsers or people who use really sort of weird browsers may not necessarily be able to get the full browser experience. So this is why people still like to use React, Vue, Angular, because even though they're not taking advantage of the web component API, which does help kind of shrink your bundle size because you're letting the browser do more of the work instead of your framework. Basically what they do is they let you do this stuff in their style, in the Vue style, in the React style, in the Angular style, and they use something like a tool like Babel to translate everything, and they use things like Webpack to parse everything. They basically use the tooling that's available to create that environment, which is nice. Again, I like using React. I've used Angular and Vue. It's a pleasant experience, but if you don't use those kind of templates that exist out there, setting up your own environment for really having sort of a robust Vue React environment, it can be a little difficult. And even at its most basic, when you use like Vue and React as a CDN link, you have to spin up a web server. So you have to use something like Light Server or HTTP client to spin a server. You can't just load up a JavaScript file and just have it work. So that was sort of the challenge I made to myself. How can I make something that bypasses all that? You don't need Babel, you don't need Webpack, you don't need the web component API, you don't need any of that. So I made two new libraries, mBlocks, which basically achieves this using classes, and Superfunc, which achieves this using functions. They essentially do the same thing and work the same way, just two different approaches, two different syntaxes. Again, this is just more sort of a can I do it? It doesn't. I would definitely say Merced UI kind of gives you the best all-around developer experience and tool set, along with Component Zoo, because they're mostly similar. But if you wanted to meet something that's going to be fairly usable across all browsers, not require setting up any external tooling, and still sort of I'll give you a somewhat of a component-based type flow, mBlocks and Superfunc will do that. So in this first video, I'm going to go over mBlocks. Okay, so let's click on mBlocks. Let's go over to the GitHub, because I'm going to do this as if I'm just someone who's never used this before, not the creator. I'm just going to download. Oh yeah, I wanted to go to GitHub. Did I accidentally put the links in the wrong spots? Let's see here. mBlocks, npm. Yeah, I accidentally transposed the links on that one. I'll fix that later. Okay, but here we go. So here's the mBlocks documentation on GitHub. Okay, really all we need is this block.js file. Okay. Or we can just borrow the script tag. Nice. Copy. Okie dokie. Now what do I want to do? I want to start a new file. Actually, I don't need this anymore, and I don't need this anymore. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this folder. This is where I generally do my practice projects, and I'm going to to my index.html here. We're going to swap out the CDN link. So I'm not going to do this as a module. Okay, so we have link to milligrams just for styling purposes. Save. Let me clear out the rest of this. It's taking a second to save. There it goes. We'll get rid of everything. Save. And again, here's using this link. I'm bringing in the mBlocks library, and then this is a link to my JavaScript file, which I'm going to clear out now. I'm just going to clear all of this out. This was from a previous effort. And I'm going to just basically change this to console.log hello. And let me just make sure my defers are all set. Good. Cool. Let's open this up in the browser. Open. Show in File Manager. And I want to open up index.html. Okay. And let's open up the inspector so we can see that console log showed up, make sure everything's connected the way it should be. And there you go. Hello. Okay, so everything's good. We are all set up. Now, the way this is going to work, so we'll look through the documentation so we can, even though I just created this, I already kind of need the documentation because I haven't necessarily practiced this too much, which is why I want to do it now so you guys can see me kind of go through it. Okay, so basically the way this works is you can use custom tags or custom elements. The way I do it is that it's got to start with M. So in this case, we're going to start off with an app component, M app, and you have to give it an ID. So ID, we'll call this app. Okay. There we go. Save. So that's set. That's all I really need to do in my HTML. I can now come back over here. Okay, what I need to do is define my first component, so that way that app loads something. Okay. So the way we do this is we're going to create a new class. You might hear my bird in the background because, you know, my bird's around and the birds are loud. Okay. Class, we'll call this app extends block. And basically what we need to do is we're going to create a constructor. Okay, let me just take a look at the model here. I will just copy these real quick. Okay, so we're going to create a constructor. And in the constructor, we always have to pass in the ID. Because basically what it does, it's going to link the instance of this component with the ID. So that way you can use it multiple times. With that ID. And then in the super, inside the constructor, that's where we pass our config object. And in there, you're going to pass in the ID, or I mean the name of the application. So that's where it gets the app part. So that's what identifies this. Okay, so notice to look for a tag that's M app, because that's the name of the component. It's always going to start with M. So you just have to define the other part. Okay, here you can define the initial state of the thing. And then here we pass in the ID. That's all in the constructor. But again, when we actually use it, all we're passing in is the ID. Builder. So then you have to define these two functions. So builder is like your render function in React. And it takes state and props. State and props works just the way like you're used to in React. So basically state, when state changes, will trigger a re-render of the component, and props takes all the properties. So basically any props that I put inside here. So if I were to put cheese equals Gouda, that will be passed in as props. Okay, oh, I don't think I forgot an equal sign. Yeah, no, I did. That's very good. Okay. So if I wanted to do this, console log props. And then here you would put in your template. So I'm just going to do a hello world. Cool. And again, we're just passing in a template string. And that's going to render where our app renders. And I'm going to clear this out for now. So assemble is a function that runs after the builder function. So whenever your component runs, it's always running builder first and assemble afterwards. So essentially, you can use assemble for anything you need to have to happen after the builder function renders the template. Right now, I have nothing I need it to do. Okay, cool. So there's my component. And then to use it, I just do new. Well, I want to save it somewhere, so I'm going to do const app. Well, we'll just call it root app equals new app, and I'm going to pass in the ID. So here's where I pass in this, the ID. So this way, if I were to create multiple instances of this, that's how it tells. Okay, save. So now that should render hello world. So let's see. Hello world. Okay. And see, there's the console log of the props. So the props are in there. Cool. Okay, now if I want, I can make it, you know, instead of I can use template literals, I can use interpolation to use props and state. So I could do something like this. Okay, and put in props.cheese instead. Save. Gouda. Cool. So it works. Now let's make a second element. Because so this is fine. We can make templates and we can put them anywhere in our HTML. So I can actually use this multiple times. So if I wanted to use this app component a second time, I can just plop it again. But let's say I give the second one, I want to give it a different ID, because it'll only render the first one. So if I do this, I'm still only going to get Gouda. It's not going to, that's why I need to give it a second ID. And again, these are sort of things that make it a little bit harder, because we had to not use like things like JSX and Babel and the web component API that would allow me to kind of do some extra fun stuff. And I was trying to make this as simple, but still give you the same workflow as possible. Okay. So I do that, and then I can just create another one. So I'll just say const root app2 equals new app2. Save. And I refresh and see now there's two Goudas. Okay, so it's just basically what it's doing. It's going to create this class based on which class it's going to render or get the template from is based on the name of the element, and then which instance is based on the ID. Cool. Now let's say I want to use the second component. So I'm going to define it above. So class child extends block. Once again, I'm going to create the constructor. We're going to pass in the ID. Super. And here's where I pass in the name. So this will just be called child. And the state, we'll just pass in an empty object for state for this one. And ID will be just whatever the ID is. Okay. Then we're going to build up our template. So builder. Again, builder needs to take in state and props. Okay, state and props and console.log. Well, we don't need the console.log props. We're just going to return. Return, we'll say h2. And then we'll interpolate props dot yes. I'll give it a property called yes. Okay. Cool. And I don't need to put anything in the assemble function, so I'm not going to bother overwriting it. Save. Cool. So that's good. Now I want to use this as a child of the app component. So I'm going to modify this. First thing I want to modify is I want to actually use a state for this. So state dot phrase. And then also in this, I want to have mchild ID. I will just say ID app because it's in my app component. Slash mchild. Okay, cool. So now I have that mchild component, but it's not going to render yet. Now we'll see why. So watch, if I do it right now, we won't see props.yes, and I need to pass it a props of yes. So yes equals yes. Okay, so we pass to the props. So we shouldn't see anything yet. It broke. Uncaught error, unexpected token, line 7. Let me think here. That's an app.js7. Return. Oh, I forgot my literals. There we go. Okay, let me refresh this. There we go. Cool, but you still don't see anything else rendering. It should be rendering a h2 with yes. The reason is we have to initiate the class. So that's where the assemble function comes in. So after the builder, because if I go in my elements, I will see there's the mchild. It's there. The element's there. It just hasn't rendered a template yet. So to do that, I need to actually instantiate the class, and that's what assemble function is useful for. So now I can go in here and put in new child. I'm not going to store it in a variable because I don't need to do anything with it. I don't need to use its set state or whatever. So new child, and we'll pass it in the app ID. And now what's going to happen is that when this runs, it builds out the template, and then this runs, which then just instantiates the class. So essentially, as I use custom elements in my template, I just need to make sure I initiate them here. And otherwise, it works. And there you go. Now we see yes. Okie dokie. Didn't instantiate the second one. So probably what I need to do, I probably need to give it a unique ID. So here's what I will do. This gets passed in the ID. Oh, the ID is going to be in the props anyways. So what we'll do is we'll just do this. ID equals props dot ID, and then this will be props dot ID. I'm pretty sure this gets passed state and props as well, so I can do that. Let's look at the docs. Pretty sure I can pass assemble. Well, let's give it a shot. Okay, so I'm gonna fix that so in the library, so assemble does get past state and props. But for now, it's a pretty simple enough workaround. I can just do this. This dot ID equals ID. There we go. So that way I have access to the ID, and then I can just do this dot ID. Okay. Save. And let's try this now. Read property attributes of null. I grabbed the ID property from the wrong constructor. So let's put it over here. This dot ID equals ID. As you can see, I just built this library, so I'm still working out a lot of the kinks. So save, or discovering what the workflow should look like. Save. Okay, and then that's okay. So that ID gets popped here and here. So that's all should stick around uniform, and Let's take a look here. Child ID. The child is still getting an undefined ID. Let's take a look. This dot ID equals ID that's passed in. So technically ID is app2. We're passing in the ID here, so that would go to this constructor there. And let me just console log. I think I know why. Because technically super is going to invoke builder and assemble the first time. So this needs to be here. I'll streamline this a little bit. But we're making the video now, so you guys are seeing a work in progress. But a work in progress worth following. Save. Let's see here. Let's refresh. And instead must call and drive class before accessing this or returning. Okay, so it won't let me do that. Yeah, so I'm gonna have to edit that so that way I could pass in the ID as props. Because it'll work there. So if I do this as props.id, that's fine. The problem is since I don't pass props over here. Props.id. I think of a workaround right now. I could do something like this. This dot props equals props. Okay, and then here I can now access this dot props dot ID. Yep, there we go. Okay, again, I'll fix that so it's a little bit more elegant, so you can use props both in the assemble function and in the builder function. At the time, I just said that slipped my mind. Okay, that's a quick fix. But yeah, so there you go. So literally, I can build reusable components. Not too difficultly, like that was a little bit more difficult than I need to be. But see, it's just a little extra step. So if I include that component as a child of another component, all I have to do is just make sure to put these constructors in the assemble function. Otherwise, it works the same. And I can change state. So let's actually try that. Okay, so let's create a function. Const change state equals, okay, it's just gonna do a standard just change state. So I'm gonna change this, but only gonna change root app, not both of them. So root app dot set state, and the new state is gonna be the same as before, except now the phrase property is gonna equal goodbye world. Cool. I think I have too many curly brackets. There we go. Okay, now let's put that inside, make that a click event. Sure, let's just put it in here. On click equals equals, what's the name of the function I did again? Change state. Change state. Let's refresh. Now if I click on this if I click on the first one, nothing should happen. But if I click on the second one, goodbye world, it changes state. Because we said that the first one will change the state of that first one. Neat. Very cool. So that works. And see, it still re-rendered the child component. That was sort of the tricky part. That's why I had to do that whole assemble function. That was the trickiest thing to figure out. One last little test. This is something I actually haven't tested out before, but I'm going to test it out now. I'm going to try to do this. Event. And if I do this, event.target.setState. Would that work? Let's find out. I cannot read property target of undefined. Yeah, no, I figured that was a stretch. Okay. Cool. But yeah, you each property. That's why I save them in a variable, so that way I can use their setState function. So if you want to use their setState function, if you don't plan on using their setState function like I did here, then you don't need to store them in a variable. But otherwise, yeah, that's you can do that. You can create reactive components. They have props, they have state. They can defining them can be as briefly as this. And you can insert, you can create all sorts of other methods and do all sorts of fun stuff here if you want. So the only thing I have to do is I'm going to go back and edit so that way assemble gets past state and props as well. But otherwise, this is the mBlocks library, which can be used to build a front-end library. You're not compatible in any browser because you're not using the web component API. You're not using any kind of tooling, so you could do this with just a basic editor in a browser. And that was sort of the intention with this. They create sort of that reactive component-based front-end library, but in a way that kind of abstracts away all that tooling as much as possible and keeps it simple as possible. Yeah. Again, I think the Merced UI library is probably the route that I'm invested in, but I'm still going to maintain this because it's cool and I think it's worth seeing through to the end. So you'll see updates. Check it out. Try it out. I would love to see if you build something on this. I would love to see it. Ciao.